Hello and welcome back to Bizarre Sunday. I am Andy Matsky, and that's Matthew Buchanan. We are here in our fourth episode.
I know.
Already, which
Big
is
month.
surreal that we've actually been able to get this much done. So glad you're here. Today we are talking about how to balance and figure out your hobbies and your career and your passions. Which I think we should kind of go right into because I think we could talk a lot about it.
A long time, yeah.
Because believe it or not, and I had this wild realization the other day, because we're both actually kind of qualified to talk about this, which is really weird. Not because we do this podcast.
No.
This, and I think we can talk about this more. This falls so far deeply in the like hobby, just fun thing category. But because we've both, over our lives, our long lives of 22 years, we've been able to take hobbies or like passionate interests and make them jobs. The thing I kind of want to start with, and I don't know if you have any introductory remarks besides this, but I think it's assumed in this whole conversation that you kind of have a biblical worldview of work in mind. And maybe that should have been the whole episode had we planned this a bit more through, but like as Christians and as Christian young men, how do you approach work in general? And I know that's part of what I taught, like of kind of my notes is that, but you know, the assumption is mankind being made in the image of God was given work to do in the Garden of Eden. And so work is not a part of the curse of sin, but work is a part of life, and that we can glorify God in whatever we do, and that there's dignity to every calling, every vocation is that big word people throw around a lot. That's kind of, you know, I think we say this every episode, we can do a whole episode on that maybe sometime, but that's not what we're talking about today necessarily, but that's assumed, is that when you set out to work, you're working for the glory of God, and that this is, you know, not for your own glory, but for God's. It's kind of like as an assumption in whatever we're saying. That's my introductory remark. I don't know if you have any opening statement.
That really kind of encompassed it. Like, you know, when you're doing anything, like I believe when you're doing anything, it is you're trying your best to glorify God through everything. Mm-hmm. And I think that work is very much a part of it, and that'll come kind of together in kind of what I've planned for today.
So, I think we could give a little extra biographical sketch of our lives, kind of to like show where we each come from. I think that especially helps. It's hard for me to separate my advice or my thoughts on this subject from like my experience. And it's also, I don't want to just make like, here's what I've done, or here's my life and learn from all the cool things that have happened. I also don't want to be that, but I think it gives, maybe a bit more credibility. Yeah. If you want to start us off, because you're the one like currently doing what we're talking about today.
So when I was younger, I had always had this like love for music. Like my mom would cite me like jamming in the car as like a 5-6-year-old to old Matthew West and Stephen Curtis Chapman songs. And if I ever got my hands on a tennis racket, I'd be like strumming along with it. And so for me, like that passion for music had always been there in my life. And so it started as kind of like this is a cool thing. I'm going to play piano. I'm going to learn all the stuff. It was kind of like a nice escape for a little bit. And then as I got a little older, I started learning all the things. I played on the youth group bands because, they needed and they wanted young students to come in and play. They didn't want it to be all adults. And so back then it was much more of like I pick it up whenever I have the extra free time, but it's not like oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend the time practicing to become super great at this because it's going to be something that I'm going to do long term. And so for the longest time, like it was, I'm just going to throw a couple hours at it here and there when I'm free, when I'm not, playing video games, sports, the whole nine. And then as I was getting older in high school, and I had left one youth group to go to another, it kind of became a little more real in a sense of like, oh man, this is really cool. I'd love to continue to, do music full time. I love using this thing that turned that was a hobby, that was like a peaceful thing that I found joy in, and kind of turn that into something a little more serious. So I was like leading the youth group band at the time, and I was like, all right, I'm going to spend a little more time. So I would come home from school, and instead of just hopping on a video game, I would be like, all right, what can I learn on the piano, or what can I learn on the trumpet? What can I learn on these different things? Still have not really gotten super great at the trumpet. I'm trying, and it really hurts the lips. But it's just one of those things where it kind of started slowly turning into something that became a little more realistic. And then I had a conversation with somebody when I was doing some dual enrollment classes through a university, a professor at the university who basically told me to just give up. And they were like, this isn't realistic. You're not good enough. It's not going to be something that you're going to be able to do. And so that hobby that was becoming so real to me and like something that I wanted to do was like getting shot down by the person who was supposed to teach me the next 4 years of college. And so it was hard because what had started becoming like, oh man, I could do this, like I'm getting good, kind of instantly became this sucks. And so first year in college, I'm in the worship ministry program, and by the second semester, I was changed to the youth program, because taking classes from a guy who's telling you you're not good enough, and you're not going to be able to turn this into a full-time job because you're not good enough and you're never going to be good enough, just give up on it. Just let it go. Just continue to do it on the side, maybe lead a worship night or two here or there. And so I listened to him. I believed every single word that he said. And so I changed my major completely. I still kind of helped out on the chapel band, but then I ended up leaving the chapel band at my school for a little bit because I was just so bummed. So it kind of went back from that, like, this is my job, this is something I want to do, to this is the piece, and this is the hobby, and this is I'll chuck a couple hours here and there at it. But it had always continued to stay an important part of my life. And then as I finally got to, I played on a band for a little bit at college, just as like a side little gig. We played a couple of shows a year, Urban Light. We talked about it last episode. Or maybe it was 2 episodes ago at this point. But I played on that band, and then I met the youth pastor here, and he was like, oh, well, we're actually looking for a music guy. And I was like, well, I'm not a music major. I'm a youth major, and, so I felt like it wasn't going to work. But for whatever reason, God took the passion and the hobby that I had and the thing that I had given up on and said, no, see, we're going to let you, I want you to do this. I'm going to put you in a place where this is your sole role. And so it really did, it was a roller coaster of emotions when it came to, finding the job role while always having a passion as a hobby. So that's kind of my, history with it. And I'll have some more things later about it, but that's, I guess, the background.
Yeah, that's really wild. Having someone tell you give up is crazy. That's not, I feel like that's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
in those situations.
And that professor, I love him to death. He's one of the most worshipful guys I've ever interacted with. But he straight up told me that I was not conducive for a church worship leader role. And that was as I was 16 when he first told me that. And that was real tough. And then I think that there was a growing respect that came as he continued to see me serve. at the school in little ways. And so by the end of it, I think he was just proud to know that somebody from CSU was going out and filling a role in that capacity. But I definitely, it was a hard thing to kind of get to a good place with him about it all.
I bet. I can only imagine. So Matt is a worship director at a church now. My hobby, passion, whatever you want to call it, what we want to, exactly during this episode, but is filmmaking and like, and it's like funny enough, like thing I've done a ton is podcast production more than anything, because filmmaking, videography, that's another thing people say. It's another word for it. But I grew up, and I really was reminded of this recently, but like I grew up like a monster kid, which is a uber specific type of like movie nerd. I loved like monster movies, old monster movies as a kid. And I still do, but especially as a kid. And with that came this love of like how those movies were made. And I mean, we're talking, I was watching behind the scenes, featurettes on like the Lord of the Rings and things like that when I was in like kindergarten, and like eating up everything I could about, how to make movies. I thought special effects could be like something I was interested in, and I would make my own movies here and there. I wasn't really like doing a ton of that, and that'll come back up in my advice or whatever you want to say, that we'll say, where our counsel we'll share later. But I did that, and I had this interest, and I kind of got like a gut for filmmaking, like kind of like what made films good, what made films not good, what made things work and not work. And by the time I was in high school, we had a family friend who had a production company making, and that's what we talked about last week too, like making these independent documentaries. And so from the time I was 13, I was like kind of around the making of those. So from like 13 to 18, I kind of floated in and out of helping with those. And I can only imagine what that was like for other people involved. Thank you. If you're listening, you know who you are. Thank you so much for putting up with the fact there was like this kid around. But that was like super cool to actually see, from like planning a movie to seeing it up on like a theater screen, because they do showings at, like independently owned movie theaters, and seeing those movies then like chart on Apple or like iTunes, documentary charts was like really cool. And then right before my senior year of high school, that guy offered me a job, pretty much, or was like, hey, after high school, if you want to come work for us, we could make that happen. And so pretty much from before senior year started to like the end of senior year, I knew what I was going to do, and it was this like filmmaking stuff. I didn't think about college one bit, because it was like, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to figure it out and maybe like go somewhere else in my life eventually, but this will be the cool thing I'd go do. And then I did. I went and I worked for that production company, worked for Small Town Monsters. I'm not hiding the name of it. And I mainly produced podcasts for them. That was like the main thing I did. I, continued a couple productions they had going. I helped start a show with a lady named Heather Mosier. And that show started to gain some traction. Pretty much, in like a niche community, there were people who were fans of the show. Nothing like crazy mainstream, but stuff that got, pretty significant views, kind of like surreal amounts of people would tune in. And that was super cool. And then I worked for there, about like 10 months, and then a ton of life stuff happened. There's more than I can say on this show happened. There's just a ton in like pretty much every area of my life. Something was going down. And so that led to me like not really being able to keep that job. And so I thought that was it. There wasn't any, no one was telling me to quit because I wasn't any good, but I just was like, this is it. This didn't work because that was part of it, was for whatever reason maybe today is the day to like share part of that, but like I didn't know what I was doing when I was literally figuring out like things like color grading and audio production, like as I was doing the job. And I already pretty regularly struggle with like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Has been like a for real struggle at times of like, I don't deserve this. I don't belong here. What am I doing? And that was kind of constantly there. And there was almost nothing like reassuring that.
Yeah.
And so once it went, kaput, I was like, okay, I'm done. And then I started working like a real job, another real job of like working in a machine shop. And that paid me pretty decent money. Yeah. And so one day I was like, you know what? I still like filmmaking stuff. I still like, shooting stuff when I'm like on a trip or something like that. I want to buy a nicer camera. So I reached out to a guy from my dad's church. Shout out Mark Reichel. A supporter of this show, and
awesome.
A big supporter of everything creatively I've done over the years. But I reached out to him because he's a photographer, and I said, hey, are you selling anything? And turns out he was selling a Lumix GH5. That's allow me to talk another language for a second. But and so I bought it from him. That's the camera we're recording with right now. It turned out it's like the perfect, hey, you want to be a filmmaker, here's like an entry-level camera.
Yeah.
And so I had that, didn't really do anything with it till my good friend Josh Milovasic was running for the State House of Representatives and needed some campaign videos shot. And for one reason or another, I was like, hey, I'll take care of you. Let's do this. And that's really what started it again for me, was recording kind of that main video for Josh. Got the itch going again because I borrowed some lights from my buddy Santino, who I've also done stuff with. A lot of my work on like filmmaking has not been glamorous stuff. Like, I mean, you can check my IMDb, but that's incomplete. But for Santino, I've been like a key grip, which is essentially like I hold stuff. You hold stuff and you move stuff around. But I helped him with a short film. It's called The Beast that you should check out. It's like a spec ad. It's like 2 minutes. If I remember, I'll link it right now. You can like click a corner thing, but I probably forget. And I've helped him with that, and he lent me lights for this thing for Josh. And so I kind of lit it creatively, kind of really bad, but like really creatively. And then Josh and I did more. We bought some more gear for the campaign, including, I don't know if I should say this, but including the light we're using right now has been lent to us from Josh. But that kind of got the ball rolling in, and that was really fun. It was like me and Josh would get together. Almost all of those videos were shot on this camera that we're using now. And it was fun. It's me and Josh. It was part of this like me and Josh against the world vibe of that campaign, which I'd love to get him on to talk about that sometime. But we did that, and those really didn't go anywhere. Like, I think the most something got was like a short got 1,000 views. I think like our podcast has gotten more traction than his campaign, but that led to some more, like the campaign kind of, that got the ball rolling to where I did some fun creative stuff with with Santino that still has yet to see the light of day. That's all my fault that it hasn't. And then like the gear just kind of built up, and part of this, and I think I'll say this again, is like good camera gear is like really affordable now.
Yeah.
It's like from when I was a kid, literally, less than 10 years ago to now, it's like you can pick up good stuff for cheap. And so I've just been picking stuff up, and now the crazy part, and it's so crazy to me that I almost forget to talk about it, is I'm doing like photo video work for another company now.
Dang.
Like that's my job. And that like hit me the other day.
Yeah.
Was like, it really has been this thing where it's like, it was my, and promise we didn't like script this out between the two of us, but it really was like my passion as a kid, kind of got a taste of it, but went, you know what, forget it for one reason or another. And to maybe give myself a bit of credit, it kind of was like, okay, God, it's my life is in your hands. If you want me doing this, I'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'll walk away. And then I kind of like worked my way back to it to now where we're doing this show. I'm doing stuff for that company and I'm really enjoying all of it. Between the two things I'm doing now and that show with Santino, like that has yet to come out. Like it's been the most fun I've had working on things, I think. And that's really saying something. Like those Small Town Monsters shoots are some of my best memories and best trips have been on those shoots. So like, it's kind of crazy. And it did hit me the other day that like, oh my goodness, I think I am actually kind of qualified to talk about this in like it's in a weird way where like I am doing this now. And I have this, like, I've been working on stuff for like 9 years.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so crazy what God will do with like what your interests are.
For real.
It's so cool. So cool. So do you have advice? How do we want to do this? Because I have like 3 points that are kind of like 3 sides of the same coin. So that don't necessarily need to be like given in an order. Hi guys, we should have done this before the episode. I'm sorry. But do you want to give all yours in an order? Do you want to go back and forth? You go for it. You go for it, and you'll see if I have anything else to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. The one thing that I really want to like start with is not everybody is as lucky as us to have been with like being able to use our passions and our hobbies in a like actual real life job that we get to do every day. And like, I acknowledge that. And I think you can acknowledge that as well, as like, we are very lucky to have what we have and to be able to do what we do. And I don't want to go past that without acknowledging that like, not everybody gets that. But that doesn't mean that you can't use your gifts and abilities and your hobbies to continue to glorify God, and even sometimes get to use them in really fun ways. Like I was just talking with somebody earlier today. Their passion is like, they love baking. And I said, like, don't be afraid to just do it. Like there are people who like my sister for a good like year or two was just making cookies for people, and she'd take orders and she'd do the baking and she'd make the cookies and she'd make extra money. And like for her, that was way more fun and also way more gratifying, and also was just a good way to make money and use her time. And like, I think for some people, we often let go of hobbies and passions because, oh, well, I've got to grow up and I've got to be an adult. When that's not the reality. In fact, life is so much better when you make time for hobbies and passions. So that would be the first thing. And I don't know if you have anything to...
I mean, I totally agree. Is some of the funnest stuff I've done kind of in this realm has been the totally random, and to sound a little selfish, like just for me, fun stuff, figuring new things out, have gotten me like the most jazzed up.
Yeah.
Like I was figuring out how LUTs work, which is like a color grading thing, like, which is it's like a cheat code kind of Band-Aid solution to get stuff to look decent. We used it on this episode, fun fact. That like the first time I did it, I was like literally sitting in the living room being like, oh my goodness, like look what I did. And so like, that's absolutely like do it. And to kind of maybe take that and run with it. That is literally like my first point is, when you're trying to figure out, is this a hobby? Is this a career? Am I really passionate about this? And this is like the big thing for me. It's a simple question that's going off of that is like, and it's a hard one. It's a hard one off the gate. Are you actually doing it? Or is this something you just daydream about? Yeah. Now again, I think to really harp on what you said, we're lucky and we're fortunate I have a fairly disposable income that I can spend on, camera gear when other people don't have that privilege. So there's that. Like, that's a valid point in all this. Like, you and I are, young single guys. We can kind of do what we want with our money and our time, and not everyone has that. But if you're another young person, and this is kind of like our target audience right now is like young creatives, right? Are you actually doing the thing? Because I wish someone had asked me that, and maybe got that thinking. Because like I loved daydreaming about movie stuff, about filmmaking, but I was not taking the time to perfect my craft.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference.
Yep.
And I think like almost between the two of us, like you would take a couple hours and you'd work on it and like I will burst your bubble right now, person listening to this. I'll be the bad cop. Just watching movies isn't enough. Like,
yeah.
Maybe Tarantino would say something different, but it's like and maybe he probably wouldn't. Like, it's not enough to just sit there and like think about what you'd want to make.
Yeah.
You have to actually put in the work, especially as in any hobby, right? That's like the people who seem like they have natural talent are the people who've practiced 10,000 hours, right? So you actually have to put in the practice. And that's the thing where the people who I know and I look up to, personally, who are these creative people, are the people actually doing things. And it might seem kind of obvious, but it's the people who know their stuff and then put that into practice. I will shout him out. Like my buddy Santino, my good friend, is the example of that to me. He's not just a guy who sits there and like twiddles his thumbs of going, oh, I want to do this. I mean, for one thing, he's been either, full-time or freelance here doing this, he does like filmmaking, motion graphics, CGI work. He's been actually doing that full-time for 5 years, but also like before he's even doing that, he was spending his free time actually making things. Yeah. And even now, like in the meantime, like between like big projects, he's the most like nuts and bolts figuring it out person I probably know of. Like, you really don't meet too many people who are like, oh yeah, I like filmmaking, that then when you ask them what they're working on, they say like a line budget for my next movie. Like, it's not anything flashy, but it's what needs to be done. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm not telling you to go start figuring out how to write budgets, but it's helpful. Go make something. Yeah. Like that's the encouraging, that's the encouragement of it, is like, go actually do it. iPhones and cell phones have been good enough at video to, pass for professional for like a decade. Yeah. Yeah. So like there's been Oscar winning movies shot on iPhone for almost 10 years. So like and like the camera we're shooting on now it came out in 2017, I think. So do the math, whatever that is, 8-year-old camera you can pick up for $500, which it's a big sum of money, but is not the $2,000 that, maybe your favorite YouTuber is shooting on I mean, your second favorite YouTuber after us.
After us, yeah.
But like, you don't need all that. The gear we're shooting on is enough. I think we could do, our own respective gear recommendations later. Yeah. But like you have enough at your fingertips right now. I mean, for crying out loud, like every social media app has a better video editor in it than like I had growing up on like iMovie. So do it, get it out there, at least to your friends and family. That's the thing, is like unlisted YouTube videos exist, so you can share videos with who you want to see them, and they don't have to go out to everybody. If that's intimidating, which I think that's fair. Yeah. It is out there, but.
Well, and to kind of lead into like my personal second point, is like just do it. It doesn't need to be amazing. It doesn't need to be the best of the best quality. And that's legitimately leading off of like what you just said. I was at a wedding this past weekend, and one of the groomsmen who was there with us, he's got a band, and he was talking to me about all the stuff that they needed, And I was trying to get him to buy the, more expensive computer that can run systems better. And he was like, well, no, see, we don't need that. We just need the bare minimum to get this stuff done. And we don't need to spend $1,000 when we can spend $500 and get, all the stuff that we need. And that was kind of like oh man, like he's right. Like you don't need the best of the best stuff. You don't need all this quality stuff. If you're passionate about it and you want to make it happen, go and make it happen. You can spend all the time daydreaming about, I want to get better at this so that I can make it a full-time thing, or I want to do this so I can make it like, just do it. Get out there. It doesn't need to be the best quality. Like, as you can see, we're still learning how to do this stuff.
I was going to say, look no farther than this show.
Yeah.
And that's not, false modesty. That like really is like, no, seriously, like look at this, look at the first episode of the show.
Yeah.
It's, I've said it before, like don't let the great rob the good.
Yeah.
Like you're going to give yourself permission to fail.
Yep.
And just make it and learn. Like this very episode, there's stuff I've done that I'm going to learn from, whether it's looks necessarily good or not.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like with leading a band that plays, like worship music on Sunday mornings, where our goal is not to sound amazing. That's like a sub goal of the main goal, which is to glorify God and to lead other people to the throne. We're not going to sound amazing. That's an unrealistic expectation. We're not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the best thing you've ever heard. What it's going to be is a bunch of people who are trying their best on their instruments and their capabilities, leading other people to the throne on Sunday mornings. And if you're setting this expectation of it needs to be perfect and it needs to be great, you're never going to make it. You're always going to be discouraged, and your passion's going to die. Don't let that happen. Be okay with not sounding great. Be okay with the idea that God's going to be glorified, and be okay to just sit there and learn. That is legitimately some of the best stuff you can do. And that goes right into point number 3 for me. So I don't know if you're...
Go ahead.
Go and ask questions and learn and hear from people and do all of the necessary things to get as much knowledge about what you're passionate about as possible. One of the first things I did when I got out here was reach out to, I think, 5 or 6 local worship pastors who have all had significantly more experience than I have, who have all led teams for many more years than I have. And I said, hey, can we get coffee? I'd love to learn how you guys do ministry. I'd love to learn how you would recommend doing stuff as somebody who was in my position 15 years ago. And if you do that, it creates a sense of humility because you're asking questions and acknowledging you don't know the answers. But also it widens your scope of knowledge on how to approach things. My approach to worship ministry on the music side of things here has changed drastically since I got here, last year. And that's just in a year worth of learning from people, learning how the church here interacts with music. So do not be afraid to not have all the answers, especially as young people. It's really hard to acknowledge that we don't have it all figured out. And we've got to learn to be so okay with not having it all figured out and not having all the answers. Because if you're asking questions, it's going to just lead to a significantly better product afterwards because you're taking in all these things and then saying, all right, this is a great idea. And sometimes there are things that these worship pastors that I meet with say, and I go, no, that's just not, I'm not going to use this. It's going to go in the trash can after I leave this conversation. But more often than not, there's something that I take away from those conversations that I go, this is going to help me continue to lead this team well. It's going to help me lead myself in worship better. And it's going to help us get a better end product, which is worship to the God of the universe. And I think that that's my big number 3 is like, be okay with not knowing and ask hard questions and kind of just continue to soak up information like a sponge.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, like that is learning 101, like a self-taught learner 101 is, okay, what do I don't know? What do I not know what to do? That's the right grammar. But I don't know how to speak sometimes. But like that's your starting point is how do I actually do this? And we live in such a wonderful time where if your hobby is anything to do with like the electronic world, the information's at your fingertips.
Yep.
All the time. And that's, you just have to learn. I like it. And doing that through personal relationships is so helpful and so fun. Like that's how you can really grow and collaborate. And it's such a helpful thing. My next bit of advice is, again, like maybe the more boomer take or the more the bad cop side of things.
Oh, man.
But I think it is so important that, and from my experience, this has certainly been the case, to get a real job and not let yourself be like, oh, I have to do my passion or I'm going to die. Because one, it is the clear command of Scripture that if you're not working, you shouldn't eat, right? That's what Second Thessalonians something. I wrote the verse down, but I guess I didn't write the chapter and verse down. That's in Second Thessalonians. Paul writes that. So you have to work. But I also think that just gives you such perspective. There's such something to working with your hands. And it's not saying leave your passion, forget it,
No.
and give up on it, go get a real job. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying give yourself time and give yourself income and a season of learning and interacting with a real life experience really just helps ground you. And at least with me, that like really helped me mature. Not that sticking in filmmaking would have made me immature, but it's so helpful. It's also like I wrote the number down. I looked it up. We have 7.7 million open jobs in America. Like, go fill one of those and fund your passion to the point of like you maybe making it work. Like especially if you're a young single, creative. Maybe you don't have to be. I mean, like unmarried. When I say single, like if you're a young creative, like go do that.
Yeah.
I think and like having the biblical worldview, right? There is equal dignity to that, right? Yeah. You're not less of a Christian for going and finding a passion in another job to glorify God. Like finding the passion in, I'm going to glorify God in this and learn as much as I can about this job, take it seriously, but also I'm gonna fund what else I want to do with this. I mean, and that's what I've done here, right? Like the camera and I think the computer and some of the lights were bought with other money that I made, and have gone forward to help, with the fun things and with some professional things that I've done. I think that's just really important. And I mean, I'm a blue collar type of guy, so I try to push everyone I can kind of in that direction because I think that helps ground you in so many ways, in such important ways, instead of just working a desk job or working like retail. I think if you are a part of something that actually makes a difference in people's day-to-day lives, even if it's the literal nuts and bolts of what keeps people going, I think that's really cool and really helpful. But I'm also like, I don't know, I'm a Midwesterner and there's tons of manufacturing around us. So that kind of like runs in my blood in a weird way. And it's not saying you have to do that. And then if you do that, you'll be successful. But this is just such a helpful thing that like we live in a time when you have to go to college and maybe you're told to go to college for what you're passionate about. I'm sure glad I didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm still making it work, right? Yeah. Like if I had gone to film school, all I would have done is gone into debt and probably met some cool people. but you I think to your point, you can meet the cool people without
Correct,
film
yeah.
school or without school. So like, I'm so glad I didn't go to school for this. That really was never on my mind, especially because I had a job lined up. But and the guy I knew who went to film school was like, don't go to film school.
Yeah.
So that's
I will say, like, even to add to that too, like, I'm so glad that I didn't graduate with like a worship degree, because I ended up probably learning a better philosophy from people who have been doing it for such a long time. Whereas I think if I had gotten a degree and learned all the stuff in classes, I would have probably been a lot more headstrong about my approach. I think it gave me a lot more humility knowing that I was like that imposter symptom or syndrome of like, I'm not as qualified as some of these other people.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave me that humility to be able to go to them and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help?
Yeah. And I think like to bounce back to that point, I think there's a balance there where it's like if you work when you work one of these blue collar jobs, a ton of people who are in those either got on-site training or still don't quite know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I was certainly in that. I was in both of those categories. And I think that job gave me such like confidence, because in a year, I think it was just a year, I worked up to like a lead position from like assembly, from like bottom of the barrel. I worked up to like almost a supervisor, like supervisor responsibilities and
Just not pay.
and not pay. But, but that was like, that's so important. So like kind of to go along, and there's such, again, Christian worldview to go along those same lines. There's such dignity in those blue collar vocational callings. That was hammered into me at the college prep high school I went to, was you don't have to go to college, work in a trade if you want. They pay just fine and we need them really bad. So, I mean, if you want to be just like me, learn how to read blueprints, learn how to read a print, get some experience with how to measure things the right way, know how to use calipers, and know your decimal places. And that's what got my foot in the door with the better position at work. Yeah. And you can either learn those things. If you go to a high school that offers those types of things, like I was lucky enough to, those type of STEM pre-engineering things, even if you're not thinking about engineering, that is so helpful. I don't know. I really am. And this is, I think it's showing like this, the duality of my perspective on this is go and actually do your creative interests, work on them as your craft, but at the same time, like go find one of these hands-on jobs, because you get such a connection to real life, to reality with those, because a lot of this, at least with what I'm doing and like in digital photography, is so ethereal. It's so screen heavy that a real job, meaning like real world, touch it, get cut up and dirty job, it's so helpful because it kind of gives you perspective. And then if you find yourself still daydreaming, right, and still going, hey, I think I want a camera, then maybe this is something you should pursue.
Yeah, for real. I think, and this is probably like the last big thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, is like once you get to that place where, like, when I started here, I was on like that honeymoon phase of I get to do what I've wanted to do, and this is such a dream of mine. And then 3 months in, like that, like, oh man, like I'm still doing this. Like, it's almost like I lost that like fire and that passion for like actually doing the thing that I'd wanted to do my whole life. So I think setting healthy expectations and also good blocks is really, really important, because for me, like, getting to do what I've wanted to do this whole time, which is I've always wanted to be a worship leader at a church, like always. It was always in the back of my mind as like as a kid, like, oh, looking up, like the Brandon Lakes of the world. When you get to that place where you're finally doing what you're doing, like, make sure you continue to find joy in it. and find new ways to find joy in it. Like the way that I find joy in leading worship now is much less. It used to always be like, oh man, that was musically so great, and and now it's, oh man, like I saw that person raising their hands in the crowd, and I know what they're going through right now, and that means a whole lot. So sometimes the joy in doing your passions kind of changes as you continue to, and you've just got to continue to be mindful of like, man, like there is so much good about this. Don't lose the joy amidst all of the craziness, because once you're doing it every day, 5 days a week, for multiple hours, it can get really kind of dry and hard. So make sure that you're continuing to find new ways to find that joy and find that happiness and find that fulfillment, because it's still there. You just got to continue to look.
Yeah, for sure. It's so important to like keep your hobby enjoyable when it becomes your profession. And like for me, that's finding kind of those same things I've been doing of making sure I bring one of my fun cameras on a trip.
Yeah.
Or even so, like making it new. This latest trip I went on with my folks to New York, I only brought a certain kind of lens just to kind of do something different, give myself a challenge. And that's something like I'd never do professionally or even here. Like I shot on vintage lenses, which tend to either get you really cool results or really bad results. So it's like, I'm just going to do this for fun. And it's like a photo heavy trip for me, which I'm not a big photographer. That's like a kind of funny hole in my experience and ability, is like my photography skills are not great.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a chance to work on those and fiddle with it, like see what I wanted to do. And that's, I completely agree, is like keep it fun and it in the small ways. And, and like if it's your hobby, if it's a hobby project, like this show is a hobby project for both of us. It's obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but it's obviously not our profession. And I'm very intentional about that, especially in the ways we promote the show. I want to make sure we're on a schedule and we do things a certain way. But at the end of the day, it's like, if I'm not having fun with it, or if it's adding something extra to my plate that I don't need, it's not there.
Yeah.
Like this week might be a little light on shorts and social media presence because it's a busier week. I'm kind of like getting back in the swing of things. So it's like, this is a fun thing and I'm going to keep it a fun thing. And that's super important. That is really, really important. I think if we I think we kind of need to wrap this up. I think it's important to look for openings in Providence for what you feel called to.
Yeah.
It was kind of easy for me to say, and again, this takes wisdom and this takes godly counsel and discernment, but having a filmmaking job lined up for the fall of the next year was kind of easy for me to go, I'm going to do filmmaking with part of my life.
Yeah.
And having, a guy come across your way saying, hey, we're looking for this position. Do you know anybody? Makes it kind of easy for you to think, I think I might want to do this. But sometimes you have to, this isn't sit around and wait for openings. Sometimes you have to, you
gotta look.
You have to look. It's like the photo and video stuff I'm doing now wouldn't have just come my way had I not said, oh, I see you need this work. I can do it. Here's a couple videos I've done. Or me calling up Josh Melavasic and saying, hey, we're going to make you a video for this. It's a bit of initiative on my part, but it's so important. And whatever you do, I want to read Colossians, because that's kind of, we've talked about this, but that Paul writes in Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. So remembering that in whatever you do, whatever you find, and if that is, a trade job that you thought would be something that was your in-between that actually you find a passion for, or if that's your hobby, your job, your schoolwork.
Yeah.
do it for the Lord, because that's where you'll find your reward.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, that was awesome.
Awesome. Well, like, comment, subscribe, write us at bizarresunday@gmail.com for your episode ideas or feedback. We are eager to hear whatever you have to say. I know we have a bit of a backlog of episode ideas between what we want to do and what people have suggested that we really like. So be patient. Send this show to a friend or your grandma.
Be mindful, the cash grab starts now.
Yeah, we will have merch soon. Maybe.
Maybe.
I wish we had merch right now.
It'd be awesome.
I want those stickers, but our logo is not done yet.
Actually, I was told it was done.
Really?
Yeah, I was told yesterday.
I haven't been
that
sent
was
it.
done. Yeah, we haven't been sent it because that would make sense, but.
Well, maybe it's done. Sorry. I don't know. That's it. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on TikTok. If you like the show and you have a TikTok account, follow us on TikTok because they like it more when you have more followers. And we have like 4 right now.
And I'm one of them.
Yeah, you're one of them. And then it's 3 probably bot accounts. Funny story. I said it earlier, but I got a message on the TikTok that was maybe from a bot, maybe from a real person that said, "I love you podcast." And
Nice.
I just think that's so funny because they either forgot the R or she was writing the podcast. And it just was, it's so funny. I love you podcast was like the highlight of my week to see that little thing. She was talking to the podcast itself, not one of us. It was just a funny idea. We'll talk about Josiah Queen more next week.
Yes, I have a lot of hate lined up.
Yeah, we've been building our hate for Josiah Queen.
Yeah.
We'll wrap this show up now. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Awesome.